On this episode of Georgia Outdoors, we'll explore how technology helps to find solutions to ecological problems and take a look at techniques for solving crimes in the outdoors.
Funding for Georgia Outdoors has been made possible by a grant from Mary Hall Singleton and by the Imlay Foundation.
From the nightly news to the endless parade of TV crime shows, our lives are filled with a constant stream of images and stories depicting unsolved crimes, scenes of foul play, and ongoing investigations. But how close do these televised images compare to the reality of solving crimes? In this program, we'll find out how some of the same tricks you see on television are used to investigate outdoor incidents and environmental infractions. Georgia contains an abundance of natural resources, majestic mountains, a diverse coastal ecosystem, and miles of pristine forest. But we also have a thriving human population with bustling cities, growing industries, and millions of people consuming and using those resources. Finding a balance between the two and keeping Georgia's water, air, and land clean is no easy task. When there's a problem with pollution, the Environmental Protection Division Emergency Response Team is called in to act.
Oh, wow, look at all that.
Today, Mary Smiley and Jerry Campbell are investigating a report of pollution in an Atlanta stream. Streams like this feed into our major rivers, so it's important to find and eliminate the source of the pollution. This takes some serious sleuthing.
My unit is the Emergency Response Program. We are a part of EPD, and we're charged with investigating any kind of incident that poses or potentially pose an immediate threat to human welfare and or the environment.
We can get some samples here if we can get down there. Today's investigation was similar to a lot of our water investigations where we verify that we do have a pollution, some type of pollutant in the stream, and then luckily everything flows downhill, so we just start going upstream looking for possible sources and identifying where the pollution came from.
A watershed is a land area that drains into a particular river system. Georgia is home to 52 watershed areas. Any activity that affects quality, quantity, or rate of movement in a river system can affect everything along the way. Therefore, it's important to monitor streams, creeks, and rivers at every level to help keep our water clean.
Usually when we come to a polluted creek or waterway, we observe the landscape around to see whether or not we can find any indicators or where the pollution might be coming from. And if we can't find it at the source of where we showed up or where the complainant said it originated, we'll have to actually get into the stream and walk it and try from that point to determine where the pollution is coming from.
The team takes samples from different locations along the waterway. Using a chemical strip, they test basic levels of pollutants such as petroleum.
If we get a negative response by using a chem strip, we still have to go a little further and walk the creek, still trying to determine the source of it. And as we walk the creek, we try to determine the nature of the pollutant, whether or not it has an odor, or whether or not it's sticky or gummy, or whether or not it's a natural occurrence. If it's a natural occurrence, we will take note of that, and then that ends our investigation. But if it's something that's coming from an industry or from an abnormal source, we try to track it down.
The EPD investigative unit has to go straight to the source of the pollution. This can involve getting into some tight situations.
The job can be physical, demanding, because a lot of times we have to go down a ravine to get to the surface of the water, and sometimes we have to fight a lot of undergrowth.
The pollution in this stream was reported by a nearby resident. Because of the thousands of miles of streams and rivers to monitor in Georgia, the EPD relies on citizens to take notice of differences in area waterways.
If the waterway is not flowing and if it's not clear, it is suffering from pollution. Now, there's degrees of pollution. Sometimes pollution can be on a natural basis. It could be algae just growing due to the nutrient load in the waterway. Sometimes it can turn colors naturally. Or the other end of the pendulum, it can be due to an industrial discharge. People who live near waterways, they can discern the subtle differences from day to day. They can tell when that is polluted because they're there every day observing their waterways.
Hey Mary. Hi, how are you? Good.
Once the samples are collected, the emergency response team drops them off at the Environmental Protection Lab for analysis. Here, the water samples go through a regimen of tests to determine exactly what pollutants are in the water.
We analyze all the samples, for the most part, within the state of Georgia that having to do with the environment.
In the metals lab, usually that involves some type of leaching procedure or acid digestion of the sample, where we are using a hot acid to remove metals from the soil or the water and make sure they're in a soluble form before they're actually put into the instrument. In the organics lab, we're going to extract those organic compounds with some type of solvent to remove the compounds of interest from the sample.
Every chemical has a unique chemical fingerprint. Determining this fingerprint is a big job, and the machine that does the work has a big name, the gas chromatograph mass spectrometer. Samples are placed into the machine, and the contaminants are noted and analyzed. The fingerprint is then matched to examples of possible contaminants to try and figure out what's in the water.
The area where Mary's samples came from, it was an industrial area with several different industries in the area. There was some staining in the creek. There was obviously some type of organic contaminant on the water, on the banks of the creek. And the idea was to try to figure out which one of the industries that sample may have caused that contamination. I guess a food manufacturing company, they're using a vegetable oil. And while there were some small amounts of petroleum hydrocarbons, as you might expect from any industrial area, the predominant contaminant in that area was a vegetable oil substance. And we were able to match that with a solution that we've gotten from the industry, and it matched up very well.
This is just one example of many pollution cases handled every year in the state of Georgia. From the water to the air, the EPD emergency response team is working hard to make Georgia a cleaner, safer place to live.
Pretty little stream.
Georgia citizens can also make a difference by joining up with volunteer groups like Adopt a Stream and Rivers Alive, two organizations that are working to make sure our waterways stay clean.
If someone cares enough about their local stream, they can be an Adopt a Stream volunteer to monitor its quality, monitor the health of the stream, learn about what pollutants are of concern, what the possible sources are, and evaluate the stream and the land use in the watershed around their stream.
We have probably 20 or more volunteer days, work days, a year throughout the state. And you can go once a year, you can go once a month, whatever your schedule allows, and depends how much passion and commitment you have for the objective of protecting biodiversity in the state of Georgia.
By getting involved with volunteer monitoring programs, the investigation falls into your hands. So instead of watching on television, you can become part of the solution, right in your own backyard.
Water quality is an important part of a healthy ecosystem. Here are some of the things that you can do to help keep the streams and rivers near you clean. Correctly dispose of hazardous household chemicals. Better than that, buy non-toxic household products when possible. Recycle and dispose of trash properly, and never flush non-biodegradable materials down the toilet. Conserve water and avoid overwatering your lawn and garden. Use natural fertilizers on your lawn and decrease hard surfaces around your home. This will improve drainage. Recycle used motor oil. Avoid putting it down gutters or down storm drains. Be an activist. Contact your local public officials or attend public meetings to know more about the laws that protect our water.
In the outdoors, accidents do happen. When it's a hunting or boating accident, the investigation falls to this team, the Department of Natural Resources Critical Incident Reconstruction Team, or CIRT.
We get called out on, most of the time, our worst hunting incidents and boating accidents. And we do reconstructions of both, which means we go back in and we reconstruct these hunting incidents and boating accidents like they were before they happened, so we'll know what happened.
Today, the team is investigating a common hunting violation, poaching, hunting in the wrong place with the wrong weapon.
We had a complaint. We had a person hunting on an archery-only area. He was bow hunting, and he heard a firearm or a shot. He went out to the road, and he seen a person in camouflage getting into a vehicle with a firearm.
After receiving the complaint, the CIRT members visit the location, looking for clues. From the obvious to the minute, they piece together the events of the day.
First thing we're going to do when we arrive on the scene is we're going to find out if anybody's hurt or injured or anything. If there's nobody there, the scene is abandoned, then we're going to start looking for evidence to collect.
Shot path come through here.
When we go to a scene, the first thing we usually do is we have evidence flags. We'll figure out how much evidence we have there, then we'll come back and we'll number it just like you see on television with CSI. We use the same process. What they're using on human beings, we use it on wildlife.
The scene is flagged and numbered, indicating the location of every piece of evidence. In a hunting incident such as this one, the location of the perpetrator is critical. In order to figure out exactly where the suspect was sitting, the officers look for broken branches and disturbed vegetation to determine the path of the bullet, or shot path.
And the shot path will take us to where the actual poaching took place, where the animal was killed at. And you see these limb clips where shot has traveled through the leaves or the brush, and we mark all those. If you're trying to articulate this to a jury, we mark these with red flags. You can actually see the shot path where it went through the brush to get to the point where the turkey was killed.
In this situation, the alleged offender used corn to bait the turkey. Using a common turkey call, he attracted a nearby gobbler and remained seated at the base of a tree until the bird was in sight. To an experienced eye, these clues, the empty shell, the footprints, the feathers, and other items left at the scene tell the story of what happened here on the day of the incident.
Let's remove the flags, and what we'll do then is we'll take some photographs of the evidence we got. I usually assign somebody to be the photographer. He goes in after the evidence is marked, and he'll take a picture, usually 2 or 3 photographs of each site, which will be an overall photograph, a medium photograph, and a close-up or a macro photograph of the evidence. That's done before it's collected. Also, if it's something like a footprint, we'll put a scale, like a ruler, involved to show the size of it.
Next, measurements of the scene are taken, and key locations are recorded.
Once we collect the evidence, it's bagged, tagged, and then we take it to the crime lab for processing. If it's DNA testing for human DNA, we would send it to our crime lab. If it is wildlife DNA, we would send it to a U.S. Fish and Wildlife lab out in Oregon. So our next avenue would be, we have already worked the scene, we have collected this evidence. We're going to go question this individual. If he wants to confess, and tell us what happened out here today and clear this matter up, we may can solve it there. If not, we're going to have to go to the next level, which would be acquire warrants for his DNA and search warrant for his firearm. That way we can tie him back to the scene if he is indeed the scene.
Knowing the hunting laws in Georgia is the first step in avoiding situations like this. Be mindful of the legal season for game species and find out where the legal hunting lands are in your area.
There are essentially two types of lands that are huntable in Georgia, private land and public land. For private land, a hunter would have to go find out who owns the land, go to that landowner, ask for written permission. If you get the written permission, you need to keep that on your person at all times while hunting on that land. Also, we have public land. Georgia Wildlife Resources Division operates several wildlife management areas throughout the state, encompassing over, I think, 1 million acres of land. Essentially, all you would have to have would be the proper licenses and a WMA stamp in order to hunt that land.
The most important step in avoiding hunting incidents is knowing and following the rules of hunter safety. Beyond wildlife investigations, the CERT group also handles scenes where a hunter has injured himself or another hunter.
Most of the time, believe it or not, in hunting incidents, you are probably the most danger to yourself. A small percentage is where a shooter shoots someone or somebody is mistaken for game and shot. Those are the worst incidents that can take place because you have actually one hunter which taking his firearm, sighting in on another hunter which he thinks is an animal and pulling the trigger. You've always got a serious hunting incident that happens out of that.
When using firearms in the outdoors, occasionally the worst can happen. These situations put the skills of the investigating officers to the test.
In this situation, the hunter should have definitely identified his target. He had an open field here, and the game animal would have come into the more open instead of shooting through those pine trees that he was shooting through. If he had waited just a split second, the victim would have popped out on the other side of those pine trees and he would have seen it was clearly a person instead of shooting at movement.
In reconstructing the scene, the same techniques are followed in this situation as poaching incidents. But the stakes are higher when dealing with human injuries.
What would happen to the shooter in this incident would be basically left up to the district attorney. But what we would do, based on the information that we've got, he made a critical error and there was a lot of negligence involved. So what we would do is we would present our case to the district attorney of the county that this occurred in, and he would be the one to make the final decision on it. But our recommendation would be felony misuse of a firearm in this situation. When you pick up a firearm, you pick up the power of life and death in your hands. And if you make a conscious decision to pull that trigger on something you've aimed at, and you do great bodily injury or kill someone, you're responsible for that. And you cannot call that shot back.
Another role of the critical incident reconstruction team is on the water. With miles of coastline, 9 large reservoirs, and hundreds of miles of navigable waterways, boating is a popular pastime in Georgia. With as many boats as we have on the water, particularly in the summer months, accidents are inevitable. When accidents do occur and there's a question of circumstance, the DNR team is called in to investigate.
The main incidents that we investigate involve serious injuries, fatalities, where someone has been seriously injured and carried to the hospital and the incident is in question. We need to go back and reconstruct that incident and find out what happened based on the evidence that we have available at the scene and from witnesses.
Once the scene is safe, the investigation begins. Much like a hunting incident, the first steps involve surveying the scene, interviewing witnesses, taking photographs, and marking evidence.
We had a gentleman who was a captain of his vessel traveling at a speed too close to a dock. He lost control of his vessel and collided with the dock. When he collided with the dock, he received substantial injuries, had alcohol in the system, we went back to try to reconstruct what happened at the scene.
After the main witness to the accident is interviewed, the officers diligently document the scene with photographs, measurements, and pages of notes. They then collect certain key pieces of evidence to take back to the lab.
Some of the main pieces of evidence that we collected from the scene are the subject was intoxicated. We found a beer can at the scene. We want to take that beer can, see if we can have any fingerprints off that beer can that can tie that beer can back to the operator of that vessel. Some other debris that was on the dock that was left when the boat collided with the dock was a fish finder, a rope, some booklets that came from that vessel. And we want to tie all that information back to that vessel.
If there was an injury or fatality involved, the investigators also take blood samples from the scene, which undergo DNA testing. In order to further establish proof of who was involved in the accident, fingerprints are obtained from the evidence whenever possible.
One of the methods we use is a fumigation chamber, where we take super glue, heat it, get the fumes from the super glue to stick to the fingerprints. Another is a powder, which everybody's seen, that you see on TV. And there's different kind of powders. There's fluorescent powders, magnetic powders. So we go through a variety of methods to find fingerprints. Once we've obtained a fingerprint that we like off of object, we want to take a piece of tape, lift that fingerprint off the object, and place it on a card with a white background so we can see the fingerprint.
After the evidence has been processed, every detail goes into constructing a virtual mock-up of the incident using a special computer animation program.
We have to use all the physical evidence at a scene to put into this program. Dents on boats, scrapes on docks. Does this boat have a scrape that matches with this scrape on a dock? What we're showing on the computer screen now is that a vessel came by the dock, the operator lost control. He ran into the dock, fell onto the dock, and went back into the water. This computer program shows that, and it shows how boats operate for someone who might not be familiar with it. Technology has vastly improved the way we collect evidence, show evidence, and I can actually prove what we're doing. Instead of having my hands showing you that two boats were going this way, I can actually go back on this computer program and show you in 3D the actual boats and how they were moving. So it's a lot better than doing this to show it on a video screen.
Boating accidents on Georgia's waterways occur for a variety of reasons, from alcohol consumption to common negligence. Officer Mike Bergamy patrols Lake Lanier and sees a number of these boating accidents.
If a person wants to buy a boat and make sure that they're going to be safe on the water, the very first thing they need to do is inspect their vessel, make sure it has the proper safety equipment. Let me see this vest this young man right here has got. Some of the biggest challenges we face trying to maintain a safe environment out here is just the sheer number of boats on this lake. This is one of the most visited lakes in the country. You have to be cognizant at all times of everything that's going around you 360 degrees because there are boats going in every direction. Anytime you drive a boat, the driver has to have ID on board. Everybody wants to have a good time, and we want you to have fun. Come out and have a good time, but use common sense, have some courtesy, and if you're going to be drinking alcohol, have a designated operator.
While DNR law enforcement helps keep people safe on Lake Lanier, on the coast, these patrolmen help keep some of Georgia's most popular sea creatures safe, sea turtles.
Rangers that work on the coast we're kind of unique in that we spend a tremendous amount of our time working with the commercial fishing industry. Good. A lot of that time is spent checking for compliance of threatened and endangered species gear requirements.
Shrimp trawling is one of the primary threats to the recovery of loggerheads in Georgia. Georgia shrimp fishermen have been involved in trying to minimize mortality associated with some of their activities. They're all required by federal law now to use a device called a turtle excluder device. It's pretty simple technology, and what's neat about it was developed in Georgia by Georgia fishermen. So TEDs certainly have worked, and we know that there's a large number of interactions between trawlers and turtles every day on the Georgia coast, and that most of those animals are getting out.
We still have some illegal fishing activity. We have improperly or illegally installed TEDs. And there are also certain types of TEDs that we feel are not very effective and probably do trap and drown turtles.
In addition to turtle excluder devices, other tools are used to reduce the amount of bycatch pulled up in fall nets. Bycatch is anything harvested other than the intended catch. It's the task of officers like these to ensure that proper bycatch reduction and turtle excluder devices are installed and up to date on every shrimping vessel along more than 100 miles of Georgia coastline.
Traditionally, you think of a conservation ranger as a person that deals with recreational activities. Here on the coast, we spend a tremendous amount of our time working with people's livelihoods, people in the commercial fishing business. We want to make sure that we're doing things that both protect the environment, but also that are not going to put these people out of business too. And that's why it's so important for the industry and for the government to work together.
Whether it's ensuring that our endangered species have a future, investigating accidents in the outdoors, or protecting our air and waterways, keeping Georgia clean and safe is a big job, and officers like these help make that possible. But the work begins at home. By being responsible when enjoying Georgia's resources, we all become part of the solution.
Funding for Georgia Outdoors has been made possible by a grant from Mary Hall Singleton and by the Imlay Foundation.